So some of your faces look familiar to me. I was in a session yesterday afternoon with my colleagues, but I'll reintroduce myself. I'm Jill Hinckley. I'm the Dean for and the Assistant Vice President for Academic Affairs. I know that you have been sitting for a while, so we're going to clear our heads as I get started, and I would ask you if you could stand up. And I would ask you to move 2 steps to the left. And then move 2 steps to the right. And then while you're standing, if that's comfortable for you, I would like you to do this. And do it for as long as you can. So we want you to feel like just like a little pressure that your brain, you're not shaking your brain, but you're getting it stimulated. Okay? And then throw your hands down. And now sit down, please. And very quickly, say one word that is in your mind about how you feel right now. Stress. Chilly. Excited. Anxious. Hopeful. Happy. Anything else somebody wants to add? Stiff. Particularly for you folks maybe who are coming from the West Coast and now you're walking into snow and sleet and yuckiness and kind of raw, right? So I just opened up like that because I wanted to give you a little sense of what your students are going to be experiencing when they go into their classrooms. So I walked in here and I recognized right away that you had been sitting for a while, you were digesting lots of information, and every time we do orientation, I say, oh my God, there's like, oh, information overload, right? It's like, how are they going to remember all this? And you're not, so don't worry, because we will give you the information and we will post it and you'll have it in a variety of ways. Also, when you're sitting for a long time and trying to concentrate, then that pulls on your cognitive load, right? So you might find yourself drifting off. So that standing up, moving is really important. A little like, well, that's weird. Why is she making me bang my head kind of thing? It gives a little novelty. So they've shifted their attention. And that one word, what that helps us do as students is to get them back in the moment. So you've closed down that last session and now we're opening up another. I've moved from one class, now I'm going to another. Michael shared a lot of information with you that kind of crosses over with academics, so I'm not going to spend a lot of time on that. I might skim it. The other thing that I want you to do, these are my props. I'm not going to tell you what they're for, but I want you to be thinking about it. Does anybody in here have, well, I won't ask that. This lights up, so I might, in a class, as I get to know students more, do the light because they flicker and I want to make sure I don't disrupt anybody that way. But just so you know, that's what that does. And I'm going to move to the first slide. Okay, so I heard a couple of people say, I'm a little stressed, I'm a little anxious, I'm happy, variety of feelings, right? That's exactly what your students are feeling. They're transitioning into a new environment, and there's a lot of things that are kind of unknown. And as humans, when things are unknown, we have a variety of responses. That fear of flight sometimes kicks in, and sometimes there's an openness that happens. And we have to intentionally think about what does it mean to transition into a new environment, and what are the expectations for me, what I have of the institution or of my professors, and that we really help to guide students through that process. That, I will say, having been here for quite some time, that I would say that transitional point, typically lasts about 3 weeks. And when you think about it, right, you're in like if you go to a new town and you don't know the roads and you don't have a map, or if you do, maybe you're not very good at reading maps. I'm not great at reading maps. And you're trying to find your footing. same thing is happening on campus. You know, some students will struggle with even knowing what their daily schedule is, and they have to really spend some time kind of getting into that routine. That takes a while for them to know where to go, who they're going to, and what they're doing. Once that happens, there's a period of settling in for students. And that's when you might get some phone calls from your students who are like, yeah, I'm really excited about this club, or my roommate and I are fast friends, or I hope you get some like, I really like my writing class. And you can tell that they're starting to get in the groove. Once they've settled in, then they can create and explore, and that is what college is all about. I think yesterday there was a gentleman that raised something that I've been thinking about for a while now, and that is, I see more and more that students coming to college have a challenge with being critical and being able to accept other perspectives and viewpoints, and that we have to spend more time deliberately, what do I want to say, helping them disrupt that pattern. And I think part of that comes from being in isolation for longer than any of us wanted to be. I think part of that comes from, as my youngest son talks about social media, being in the echo chamber. Like, you are drawn consistently into the things that you already believe. And when you do that, right, that just gets cemented more and more and more in your psyche, and it's really hard to kind of move off that. And that is challenging for some students, and that's where sometimes in the perspectives class that I talked about yesterday, perspectives in learning, their social sciences classes, even in the writing classes, that we want to spend some time with students sitting in discomfort, sitting in feeling as though they don't agree, and being able to listen to the other person. Not that, you know, a student might say, you're just trying to change my mind. I'm like, no, I'm not trying to change your mind. I'm trying to open your mind to consider things. Doesn't mean that you have to change your mind, but you have to, as a college student, you have to explore these things. What enhances success? This is the question that I get the most from families. Just tell me, what do they need to do to be successful? What do you see in successful students? And it's not mysterious, really. It really comes down to what you see up here. I can't be successful if I don't believe that I have a shot in being able to do it, right? Think about something that you're really not good at. And then think about being in a room where you have to do that 4 or 5 hours a day. How's that going to feel? You're going to love it? You're like, oh, I can't wait to get back to that. No, you're probably, at best, you're going to tolerate it. So some of what happens in these courses where have typically struggle, and I'll use writing because for years I taught writing and literature before I moved into full-time administration. That's, you know, please make me do anything else but that, right? And so in order for a student to believe that they can do it, they've got to have some success early on. And that's why we spend time breaking down tasks, doing things experientially so that they have a chance to really get in and do, I call it kind of the sneak attack, like they're getting in and they're doing the writing before they even know they're doing the writing. And then I could say, look at that. Isn't that great? You just did that. And do that more and more, and you get the idea that they can have those achievable outcomes. Support and encouragement everywhere you turn. My colleagues in the back of the room, the advisors, academic support, professors, we believe that you can do this. Is it going to be easy? No. Is it ever going to be easy? No, because learning is not easy for anyone, right? Sometimes students think like, well, if I just get these things in place, then I'm off, I'm fixed. It doesn't work like that, because we know that in college, demands just get greater. They get more complex. The more you learn, the more you recognize that you have a lot more to learn, right? It's an ongoing journey for learning. A purposeful path is the idea that in order for me to achieve something, I sort of have to know where I'm going, right? If I'm in New York City and I want to go to a really great Italian restaurant, and that's all I know, I might be lucky enough, depending on where I am in the city, to find one, because you got Italian restaurants everywhere, but it's not going to be intentional. And so your students coming to us now, either from high school, from work, or from another environment, another college, they may not be ready to talk about that yet. They might just be like, I just got to figure out if I can even do this. That's where advising comes in, and it's really helpful, is that advisors can help students understand what it is that they're good at and help them, kind of be clear about what their interests are. Sometimes, working with students, I'll say, well, what do you do for fun? What do you like? I don't know. Well, do you like being in the rural area? Do you like the city? I mean, lots of questions that can help students come to some understanding about themselves in a way that will help them push forward in finding that purposeful path. The other thing is that Career Connections provides a lot of services for students, and we've really embedded career readiness skills alongside our curriculum. So from the very, very beginning all the way up to assistantship. And that really helps students identify an area of interest and then attach it to a specific goal in Career Connections. And that has been really successful. Resilience. How many people like that word? I used to like that word. And the more I think about it, sometimes I think that when we say, oh, you're getting to be so resilient, that it feels like you can't not be resilient, right? Like there's this expectation that resilience is the gold standard, and if you are anything but, then somehow that you're lacking. And I think that I've been more mindful with that with our entering students, that we went through a phase in academia, maybe as families, like you got to have grit, you got to have resilience, and these words that have become kind of the buzzwords for a while. And pretty soon, I think it feels overly burdensome. So when I think about strategies to increase resilience, what I think about really is strategies to be able to sit in discomfort, to know what it feels like to not feel great or fully prepared for something, and to do it anyway. And that's how we grow as humans. And it's hard. And we can do it really well sometimes and other times not. So that's why we see some unevenness. And then finally, managing routines and structures. College is a lot, right? You got to manage your personal life. You got to manage your social life. You might work. You have a full schedule. You've got demands from every teacher. And then you probably got people at home that you're trying to pay attention to and be connected to. That's a lot to fit in a week. I really don't support students when they say, I can just remember it all. I'm like, oh, well, maybe you think you can remember it all, but it would be a really good idea. Could you just write that down for me? Just write it down for me. That'll make me feel better. What I see more and more is because students, this generation has become so electronic that they rely a lot on their phones, right? Oh, I'll just throw it on my phone. Phones are great. You can put in alarms. You can set up your organization and your study time on your phone. What that does sometimes is it just becomes background noise. My daughter got me this Apple Watch for Christmas, and I don't know half the things that it does, but it's dinging, and I'm like, what's that? And now I'm just like, oh, it's dinging. I don't know, it's not important. And I think that that's what happens with our students. So students are, as I showed you here in our opening activity, are engaged and active in learning. We know that in order to learn, you have to trust. How do you get trust? You build relationships. You have an open environment. We support metacognition, and we talk about it explicitly. That seemed to work really well, the way you approached that. Let's talk about what you did. Why do you think that worked really well? That didn't seem to go as well as you wanted. What do you think happened? What do you think got in the way? Just anticipating more and more as they go. Tried that once before. That really bombed. I guess I won't do that again. I'll try this. All with the understanding that approaches change over time, and what might have worked in one situation is not going to work in another. When I train new faculty, I say one of the most challenging things I had to learn as a professor here was I would support students in their executive function, particularly around writing. I think, oh, this is great, they're really making headway, and that would all fall apart. What's going on? This worked last month, it's not working now. And that would happen over and over again. And finally I was like, oh, well, it's not going to work over time the same way, because the task is not the time. They are not the same person. There are so many variables, right? You know, did you get exercise? Did you eat? Do you feel good? Do you feel bad? Do you feel like you're managing your life? Are you feeling overwhelmed? All of those things. So it's important for us to recognize that students have to get at that themselves. Strategy instruction means that, particularly in the first year courses, there is skill and practice along with content development. And that's why, and you might hear this from your students, it feels like there's a lot of assignments in these classes. And there are smaller assignments because we want to break down the tasks and help them build up to whatever it is that they're going to be doing. Again, I'll use the essay. Never are we going to say, okay, in 3 weeks, we would like you to turn in an essay on fill in the blank. That doesn't work. That doesn't help students produce writing, and it doesn't help them understand what it is that they are trying to achieve. Universal design is the opportunity to anticipate the environment and to adapt our teaching to it. We have students who have different strengths in different areas of need. We have students who like lots of emotion and moving around in the room and working in groups, and we have students who are very strong readers and strong with comprehension. We have students who are not. We have a community of learners. And so with universal design, what we are trying to do is meet the needs of every student in the room in a way that helps them progress. That's why our class sizes are smaller. That's why we have such a dedicated advising system. That's why we have so much academic support. And finally, executive function needs are built into the curriculum, to advising and to support. And then there's extra coaching you heard about if you were in the session yesterday in the Drake Center for students who want to work on something specific. So when I say executive function needs, that means being able to help students break down tasks, organize, prioritize, activate, sustain, modulate emotions. So that's what's running through our heads when we are instructing. Advisors develop a really close relationship with their students, if the students attend. To put that caveat in there. Sometimes it takes a little while, and you'll see that it's really centered around supporting the student self-reflection. Advising, if you met your advisor yesterday, your student's advisor, they might have talked a little bit about the fact that there's an advising curriculum. There are outcomes that we are actively trying to support students individually in achieving those outcomes. That we are investigating their routines and offering advice and hoping, that will help students really get in solid patterns. and what it means to be successful. The check-in and goals on progress, that happens every week. Support and communicating with professors, this is a big one. One of the things we've been talking about as a faculty is this idea that going to office hours feels really scary sometimes. And I think sometimes as faculty, we can think, why would they be scared? You know, I see them every day, I talk to them, I'm giving them feedback, they're great in class. But we have to recognize that we're asking students to move from one location, one kind of cultural setup, and then coming into potentially a private office. They're all by themselves. I mean, the first thing, you know, they might be like, well, what do I call them? Professor? Do I call them by their first name? You know, what am I supposed to do? How do I ask for help? That's a big step. And so we are now actively in Perspectives in Learning, for example, we're kind of modeling that so that they have a preview. When you come to office hours, this is what I expect. You can expect. This is where I'll be. This is what it's like. Some professors are trying to schedule their office hours right after class. And that, if it works in schedules, is really helpful. Because then they don't have to kind of go anywhere and negotiate another kind of social experience that they might not feel confident with. And then, of course, the advisors spend a lot of time advising on resources. You think you might want to see counseling? Have you signed up at the Drake Center? What about that club? What about the centers for diversity, equity, and inclusion? Any of those that you're interested in? I'll give you a minute to look at that. So this is a little risk. I hope I'm not insulting anybody, but I think it probably rings true. I will tell you that my daughter, who has ADHD and really struggled with getting up in the morning, and I swear to God, I mean, she had alarms ringing in her bedroom that I could hear 2 floors up, and she would sleep through it. So I have a lived experience. I know when students say I didn't hear the alarm, they really didn't hear the alarm. You know, like, I wish I could sleep that deeply. It's hard if you have a student who has any sort of sleep issues, waking or going to sleep, to help them really get in the groove. And so we talk with them, not about this cartoon necessarily, but the idea that you've got to have 4 ways deep to get yourself out of bed. One way is not enough. 2, you know, so let's walk through this. I have an alarm. My alarm goes off. Is that going to be enough? No, because it might not be loud enough. You might have forgotten to set it. The power might have gone off. I can think of 3 reasons why 1 is not enough. Okay. Or I might just go back to sleep. I might hear it, but I'll be like, oh, I'm just going to sleep 5 more minutes. And then pretty soon it's 4 hours later. All right. So I'm going to get another alarm. I'm going to put it way across the room. And I'm going to have it be a different sound. So it's going to jar me maybe, and I have to get out of bed. Is that going to work? I hope so. But what if my roommate gets up and turns it off because they are just tired of hearing that noise and they're up and out? Okay, so maybe the third thing that I will do is talk with my roommate and say, hey, when you get up, we have a class at the same time. Would you mind just kind of nudging me and making sure that I'm up too, just that my eyes are open? So that's an example of what we're trying to help students really prepare for. And it works sometimes. So, Anna, yeah.
How early is the earliest class, generally?
The earliest class is 8:30. You know, and actually I have to say, and Jess might be able to back me up here because she's done a fair amount of advising, there seem to be more students who actually don't mind getting up earlier and getting out to class. You know, I'll get to work and I'll see the students upstairs in the hallway just hanging out way before class. So that's kind of intriguing to me that we have a contingency of students who actually like morning classes and doing better. So Anna talked about this yesterday. Michael talked about it in the biggest context of intervention, including conduct. Why do we intervene? Well, we intervene because we want to help students at the point at which we can help them change course, right? So we want to notice how they are doing, how they are transitioning, how they are engaging, what are the positives, what do they need support with. And we do that because we know sometimes in college, a student can go to an environment where 18 weeks in, everything is great until they get the grades. And then it's not so great. And they might say, I had no idea. I had no idea, Mom, Dad, that I was failing 3 courses. I had no idea. And we work actively with students to have an idea. So if they call you and say, I have no idea how I'm doing in that class, I would encourage them to look at the comments from their professors and their grades, because that is something that we could get support in here. Students often actively avoid that, even when it's good news. And our professors are really thoughtful in how they respond to students when they are getting behind. It's not like, you know, what are you doing and why aren't you doing this work? It's like, okay, I see that you haven't turned this in yet. Let's set up a time so I can make sure that you understand what it is that you need to do. And then they'll lay out exactly what it is so that the student has a record of that. That's really important. Did you have a question?
Our student very actively does not has blinders to comments on the grades. And you can say, go in and look. You're going to do feedback on lessons is good, or there's like some sort of, you could do this. So is there sort of a backup for, it's almost like it just doesn't register in his thought process to look at those comments?
Yes. Thanks for sharing that. There is a backup, and that's really the advisor. So in those advising sessions, the advisor is going to work with the student to look at those comments, to look at Canvas, to see what's been submitted or not. Students will sometimes say, I submitted that. I'm sure I did. And I would say most of the time they think they really did. I mean, I don't think that it's a, you know, sort of an say the word. I don't think it's intentional that they are trying to pull one over on us most of the time. I think they really think they had submitted it. That's one part. Another part is we have a lot of students who struggle with perfectionism. And they're like, well, it's not ready yet. It's not ready yet. It's not ready yet. I can't show it because it's not ready yet. And so advisors and professors continually will say, that's okay, because work can always be improved. It's never quite ready. Give us something so that we can give you some. Without giving you feedback, we can't help you grow. Very quickly, notifications. This is the system of our intervention. It's an iterative system. So Anna said yesterday, Anna Hippie, who's our Director of Academic Support and Placement, that in these first few weeks, we're looking really carefully at attendance, because there's not going to be a lot of grades yet. There'll be a few small assignments. The thing that is most important in these first few weeks is that students go to class. If they don't go to class, it's really hard for them to become part of a learning community. And that's what all the professors are doing in those first couple of weeks. They're really trying to build that culture of the class. If your student happens to be someone who has a pattern of missing classes, we will tell them this, but you could affirm it in that you're not going to be shamed for walking in a class if they haven't been there. What they're going to hear is, hey, John, it's great to see you. Let's check in quickly after class. Because we know that walking through that door is really hard when you feel like you've messed up again, right? And we just, over and over again, we want to meet students where they are and help them grow from there. And that's a lot of the work of the first semester.
What is that? That's it. Top level one.
Level 1 to excessive absences. So if I'm looking at a pattern of, in the first week, missing 3 or more classes, that would be excessive in our book, because classes meet 3 times a week or twice a week. Particularly those twice a week classes, if you miss both of those in the first week, you're already feeling at a
It's an
disadvantage.
aggregate of all the classes.
Any 3, yeah. So we're actively paying attention to that. This is what the schedule looks like. I thought it might be helpful to you as you go back to your worlds and thinking about your students. So they meet 60 minutes 3 times a week or twice a week for an hour and a half. We have a little bit longer of a contact time for some. So in the classroom, we can spend more time doing activities or helping students process information. If a student is entering in the STEP curriculum, their writing in their education class has an additional half hour on top of the class time for supplemental support. And that's a chance for them to work individually with students. The first year composition and education courses are designed to have a little bit of flex so that students can consolidate information and get caught up. We know that students are going to get behind. And this is a way for us to intentionally build into the curriculum where they can get caught up. Students are often flabbergasted when we tell them how much time they should be spending outside of class doing work. They're like, what? I'm like, yes. If you want to think about doing everything that you need to do for your courses, you should be thinking about, really, it's 9 to 12 hours outside of class. A week. Yep. And I think that what I have noticed over my tenure here is that it seems to me that students are being asked to do less and less homework outside of class in high school. And so they are coming, and I'm sure that there's valid reasons for that, but the consequence is that they're coming to us without that pattern being ingrained in them about doing work outside of class. That is where the Drake Center comes in really handy, because some students need that extra push, working with somebody sort of side by side to get launched. We have a study support session in the Drake where students gather, and really it's a study learning community where they're in a room where they can ask questions, or they can say, can you just give me a quick check-in a half hour in that I'm doing what I need to do? So it's kind of a monitoring situation.
I also had a question. 9 hours per course, and if I have 5 courses, it's just.
I was just doing the math too.
So when you think of each course, so I'm in a course for 3 hours a week, and then I additionally want to have about 6 hours outside of class. I put up 9 hours there as a guideline per week. Not, did I say per class?
This is It means it's additional time.
Yes.
Oh, well, thank you for catching that. No wonder they're looking at me like. And
So 6 hours.
so
plus
6 hours per, per class, but remember too, not every week and not for each class all the time. So if they have an art class, it's going to be more project based. That's a different kind of work. That makes sense. Writing, they're going to be having to draft and that kind of thing. So I'm going to have to fix that slide. You probably say math is never my strong. Students meet with their academic advisors weekly. Some advisors meet with.
That a set thing, like from moving forward, from on? For instance, they'll work around your schedule, and maybe on a day where you don't have a class or a class, it'll be the same time every week.
Yes, so advisors this morning and this afternoon will be setting up
Sure.
their schedule with their students. So every week they will have a dedicated time.
So it's almost like going to class then?
Yes.
So that's great, okay.
Yes. Okay, and then finally, I just wanted to mention that in the Drake Center, academic support is offered face-to-face and online. our online families have full use of that experience. And I think that it's been helpful for students who tend to, they hunker down in their room and well, you've been up and down those stairs, right? So that, for some students, like, I don't want to have to walk back down the lower campus. Then I got to walk back up. So that's something to think about for them, what's going to be best modality. So finally, here we are, the title of this session, Rhythm of the Academic Semester. Talked about how we're setting the stage in the beginning, right? Focusing on small assignments, demands increase. We hope by mid-semester that they have what I call an awakening. That they're like, okay, this is working really well, this not so much, this is what I'm going to change, I'm going to regroup. As we get to the second half of the semester, we see that executive function challenges are going to increase because there's going to be more demands on what we're asking you to do. There's going to be more assessments that carry more weight. And then they're going to get to the end and hopefully they're going to be exhilarated and proud of themselves and they're going to be ready to come home and eat and sleep. So that's what our semester looks like. I want to end the session by asking you, what do you make of this? Based on what yes, it's a dumbbell. You're building your muscle. I'm building my muscle and it can make me stronger or it can weigh me down, right? So when I think about that word I said, do you like resilience? I want to think about, am I building myself up or am I weighing myself down? Are the choices that I'm making important choices or are they pulling me away? You recognize these ladies? Wonder Woman. So what, do you notice anything about this? Catches your eye? They are at the top, and we got one lady here hanging off by her heels, right? So it doesn't really matter how you get to the top or what you look like, it's how you get up there. And you don't get up there alone, you get up there with other people. That's why it's so important to us that your students engage with their community and they find at least one person, that's all they need, at least one person to connect with. And then they too can be wonder people and get to the top. And that's the end of my session. Thank you. So, Katie, do you have something? 11:30, okay. So I have a time for a few questions and then Katie in the back here, Katie Rockmore is the department chair of core education. Going to be meeting with. So questions? Happy to take a few, yes.
Advisor question.
Yep.
First is, if we have an EF coach outside,
Mm-hmm.
do we count on the advisor for EF support, or is that also something else that's available?
You can get EF coaching in the Drake. You can get just-in-time coaching from the advisor once a week. Some students continue on with private coaches. I think that's up to an individual family's needs.
But the EF coach that's at Drake is going to be dialed in.
Yes. Yes, they can.
Great, I didn't
Yeah.
realize that.
Yeah.
The second is, I'm not sure how to interact with the advisor, so at the meeting yesterday, I way too much. It takes, I'm like, this is what you need to know, because I think it's my only chance to do. What's the appropriate way to interact? What do they expect from parents?
That's a great question. So advisors certainly want to hear what parents want to share. So you shouldn't feel like you can't say something that you feel like you need to say. I would say that once you do that, what they're really going to want to do is put your student in the front and not have conversations that the student doesn't know about. So that's where, that's my only caution, is that we don't want to get in a situation where Jess calls me and says, I just want to tell you this, but don't tell David I told you. That just sets up a not a good dynamic, and we're working with these students as young adults. So, you know, if you feel like you didn't get enough time with the advisor, I think an email to them and say, hey, I'd like to just touch base with you and talk for a few minutes. Is there a good time?
I guess part of the follow-up is like, are they expecting for us to give them some of the backstory because they don't have it? That's useful.
I would say not expecting, but welcome. Advisors have access to students' files that have all the information about their testing and that kind of thing.
With the semester rhythm.
Yep.
You know, midterms and finals has always been a huge stress point.
Mhm.
How's it set up here? How do you manage that?
So I would say that as a campus, we tend to not have a lot of like finals, sit down. It tends to be more project based. And mid-semester tends to be, you know, like a bigger assignment that you're getting graded on to give a professor a chance to say, this is your standing in the class right now. Yes, in the back.
For this and the previous, I mean, a lot of this talking about sort of the landmark approach and sort of where you see challenges and how you interact is really helpful for us. I'm just wondering, where do you introduce the students to that sort of meta concepts and sort of preview for them sort of how you expect it to work and you expect them to have these challenges, et cetera, et cetera? Where is that communication happen?
Sure, thank you for that. So that happens in advising, that happens in perspectives and learning, that happens in their writing classes, that happens in their support sessions. So we're actively working to be explicit. So that idea that anything is hidden, we used to talk about as a hidden curriculum. No, this is what's happening, this is where we're going, this is what we're trying to do, this is what we anticipate. Katie's got a panel of students coming in, right, Katie, who's going to be giving some advice to students about, you know, what's your best way to launch? What are some things that you need to think about? So the other thing that I would say is that peers are a great resource. Students who have been through the first year and come out on the other side feeling like they really did what they needed to do, or they learned some things about what not to do, are really good supports for students, and students tend to really like to connect with students that way. Okay, I'm gonna have to stop us now so Katie has a chance to come in. Thank you very much for your attention.